All right, welcome to ACM Design's first workshop of winter quarter of 2022. I thank you all for your patience as we're trying to navigate this weird situation going back home again. And so we are still here and ready to put out content for you guys. And so here's the first one of the quarter. So for today, or for this week, we are going to talk about how to design your resume. And we thought this would be a little bit helpful for those of you who are beginning to either recruit for internships or full-time offers, since about this time is when recruiting for design roles usually happen. So we'll go over things like content, like the basic things on what you should add on your resume, but also on the design side of things, like how you should use your thinking as a designer to place certain elements and think about color and typography, which is why this workshop is going to be a bit different from the resume workshops that you see from the Career Center or from other business organizations on campus. So stay tuned. I hope you take a couple things away from this and that you find it helpful when reviewing or revising your own resume. So with that said, let's get started. So for upperclassmen, third, fourth years, I'm sure you've already written your resumes before. So feel free to skip over this part. This is review for most of you, but for especially first and second years, if you are starting out writing your resume or you're adding new content or whatnot, this section might be more relevant for you. So what content should you add on your resume? What's going to make you stand out to recruiters? What are things that I should add? What are things I should leave out? So we'll go over all of that. So in terms of content, and I'm going to be talking about like sections of your resume for right now, and then we'll dive into like the actual bullet points on what you should be writing. But for actual sections of information, obviously your name and contact information being a phone number, email. Also, you can add your LinkedIn and of course your portfolio site if you have one, your education and GPA. Feel free to also list any relevant information as well, such as like if you're on the Dean's Honors list or whatnot, that can go in that section as well. Your experience, so work experience, so maybe past jobs, past internships, projects. This could be personal projects, club projects, maybe research or volunteer work. Feel free to add that within the experience section. Any leadership positions that you hold on campus or any other extracurriculars that you are in, that's another good section to show that you are involved and you are gaining skills through other means. A skills section. So for this particular portion, I do want to caution that sometimes it might be confusing on what type of skills I might be talking about. So in this case, I think technical skills are going to be a lot more beneficial for you as a designer. So things like, oh, I know how to use Adobe XD and Figma or Tableau, any like software, rather than saying, I know how to wireframe or prototype or conduct user research. Although those are great, I think your work experience would probably show that better than you just saying that I'm good at like communication or any soft skills or vague skills like that. I think you can use that space for more useful information or information that's going to help you stand out more. So I would just use technical skills like programs, maybe coding languages that you've practiced on, anything of that sort. Additional information. So this can be honors, again, school honors, or maybe awards from competitions that you've been a part of, languages that you speak, things like that. And interest. If you have the space, you can put in, something to give your resume a bit of personality and show a bit more about who you are as a person. So this is only if you have the space, but if you want to fill it mostly with work experience or leadership experience, feel free to leave that out if you want to. Okay, so with that being said, how do you write the bullet points under each, like role that you've held? So first off, use power words. So what I mean by that is if you managed something or if you designed something, those verbs, feel free to use those at the very start. So first and second years, if you're watching this and you're writing like, I ran this program, or I designed this program. You can take out like, I did this or whatnot, and just go straight with the verb itself. It's going to save you a bit of white space for more relevant information. And they know it's about you anyway. But, a lot of people tend to be a bit passive about their writing and might say some words like assisted or helped. My frame of thinking is, if you worked on something, or if you helped out with something or whatnot, no matter what you did, you were a part of that process. So feel free to take the credit for that. You don't have to feel bad about, thinking that the way you're phrasing things means that you're not including other people who should be credited. I'm sure they can figure that out if they dive a bit deeper in, or through an interview if you're talking a bit deeper about that specific role or project. But this is your resume. This paper is meant to highlight what you did. So feel free to use stronger words like designed, ran, prototyped, conducted research, things like that, that show that you actually did something. You didn't just assisted or stand on the side. Insert key terms. So this is one that even I have struggles with, even now. So with different roles in different industries, recruiters are going to obviously be looking for different things. So especially for design, they're going to want to see that you know how to like design wireframes and prototype wireframes, or conduct user research, things like that. Those are key terms that really show that you are a designer, or you are looking to enter the design field, that will really catch the recruiter's attention, compared to, say, like on the business side, you're in investing, or you did market sizing, or you conducted, like you performed case studies. So very different words that really highlight the differences between each industry. And so for design especially, I would highly suggest doing the research in particular, like for which role that you're looking for, whether that be graphic design or product design, UX UI design, or UX research, or any other related role in design, and figure out, okay, like in the day of a life of this role, this is what they typically do, and have I done these things in my past projects or work experience. So insert those key terms just to let recruiters know that, hey, this is a design resume for like a potential designer down the line. Also add numbers. So with your bullet points, and as you're describing what you did in the past, it gives the recruiter a clear idea of how much you contributed, or how effective your duties were, if you had a number to showcase for it. So things like, I did so-and-so, which increased production by 20%, or I created all these wireframes, which led to 100 more users a month, something like that, that shows the effects of the works that you did. You can also include numbers saying like, or quantifying like how much work you did. So like, I created maybe like 10 frames, or I interviewed 20 users or whatnot. I would just caution putting emphasis on those numbers, because it doesn't matter really to a recruiter how many people you interviewed, or how much you designed, more like as much as the effects of the work that you did. But it always helps to add numbers into your resume. Now, a common question I usually get is like, how do I get those numbers? Especially in design, where processes might have stages, or maybe people, like you're in a specific phase of design and it's still continuing on even after your internship ends or your job ends there. And so nothing's necessarily set in stone or done yet that you can pull numbers from. That's okay. I would just recommend going to your manager and asking for numbers that you can add. And if there aren't any, maybe ask for an estimate, just so you have something to work with. But it's totally okay if you don't have any or you can't find any numbers, just numbers just make your resume a lot stronger. But feel free to, estimations are fine, or if you have concrete numbers, that's even better. Be concise and to the point. So with your responsibilities, I'm sure all of you have done so many like different things in that role. And I'm sure like it entailed a lot of work, but because your resume is only being looked at for about 6 seconds, you really want to convey, everything that you did or as much as you can to the recruiter in those 6 seconds. And being concise and to the point will help with that. So here I added kind of like a template for you to work with. So there's kind of 3 parts that you can add in. So I did action and include the action there. So that would be your power word in order to and insert the context here, which led to maybe add your number here for the result. So something like, I designed like a couple frames to improve this particular feature, which led to 100 more users a month using it, something like that. So it gives you an idea, or it gives the recruiter an idea of like, okay, this is what the situation was and what you had to do, and then this is the result of that work. And kind of like a problem and solution type of scenario. Okay, so common mistakes to avoid. A photo of yourself. So I get this a lot where some people ask, like, should I add a headshot of myself? Well, like people know, I think it might help for the recruiter to recognize who I am. I would say that because a recruiter is looking at your resume for about 6 seconds, in the midst of all that text, their attention is going to go straight to that photo. And I'm not sure that you want your photo to be the highlight of your resume. Most likely you would want the recruiter to focus on your work experience and the skills that you present, and those show that you are capable of doing, like, or becoming a product designer or a UX designer or a graphic designer or whatever, more so than a photo of yourself. So I would caution against using one. I have like in this photo here, you see that this candidate has a photo of herself on her resume. I personally find it distracting. I'm sure a lot of recruiters do as well. So I would just caution if you choose to, and I personally would not recommend it. An introduction or an overview. So again, here you can see that the top section is an introduction up here. Or like an objective. Some people have those. If you need to fill space in your resume, especially as a first or second year, it's usually okay, but I would caution against it as well. As as you gain experience, you kind of want to fill the space with relevant experience. I have seen resumes that have kind of like one line detailing what they are looking for or what they're aiming for in terms of a career. So like maybe they say like they're, like a creative interaction designer or something, like a couple words, just like one line that describes themselves or defines what they're looking for in a career or a potential career. That's usually okay, especially in the design realm. But having like a section with like a paragraph or a couple bullets is something I would advise against, just because it's not reflecting, your work or your skills as well as, your actual experience. Including common skills. So especially in business realm, and I think when you're starting out and you're kind of finding skills to put on, since you, especially for first and second year, since you aren't like as skilled as like upperclassmen, a lot of people tend to put like Microsoft Word or Microsoft Office or PowerPoint or whatnot, like all those programs there. I would just caution against it because it's a lot of people know how to use those programs, and it's not going to make you stand out. But it's okay if you don't have, if you're not like a master at Figma or a master at Adobe XD, that's okay. As long as you've like tinkered around with it and you've played around with it, that still counts as a skill. Like you still know how to use it. That's enough to put to list those programs under common skills. I would just caution against any like generic program or programs that are commonly used, just because as a recruiter, it's like, oh, here's another person that just out of thousands of people who applied that knows how to use this program. So just caution against it. Writing too little or too much. So these are for the bullets under each role. I would keep it from between 1 to 2 lines. It just depends on like your format of the resume, of your resume that you use, or how much you choose to write, but typically would not go over 2 lines, especially once you start gaining more project experience or more work experience. You want to showcase a good selection of them, and you might be limiting your space by writing too much. I'll show a couple examples where there might be like 1 line or a couple or 2 lines, just so you can see the difference. But I would just caution writing more than that. And plus, again, recruiters are only looking at this for 6 seconds. They don't want to just read, longer than that for each role or each bullet point. And it also depends on like if you use 1 column versus 2 columns of text, and I will again show at the end of this presentation examples of that. Not being specific, so again, with the actual content or the actual bullet points, be sure to really include what exactly that it is that you did and the actual effects of like the work that you did or the roles that you took on, just so that the recruiter has a good idea of what exactly that you did. Just try not to be vague, be as specific as possible. Okay, so that covers content. So now we're going to go into, the ACM design realm of things, or the design realm of things, and talk about design elements for your resume. Okay, layout. This shouldn't really affect anyone, but this is just something nice to note or nice to know. So in terms of like placing sections based on, how we read or how we naturally read, I think it's interesting to note that like in the West, we read left to right, up, down. So, like when you think about reading a book, you're reading the first line left to right, and then you move down to the next line and go again left to right. So when you are formatting your resume, that's where that's how we as humans kind of naturally read. We're reading from the top left side down to the bottom right. That's just how we're naturally reading. But if you are, say, like in Japan, a lot of books there are read right to left instead. So just a piece of, just something to note, food for thought as you are designing and figuring out like where to place each element. So because, here in the West, we read left to right, up, down, and we start at the top left. You might want to put more relevant information in that corner, or like one of the first things that you want the recruiters to know in the top left compared to the bottom right. And I'll point out some examples of this in the resumes that I will show afterwards. This is totally up to you, but just experience probably should take up the majority of your space on your resume. This includes, again, work experience and project experience. And like your portfolio, you should highlight a selection of your best work. If you're one of those people who's done like a ton of projects and had a lot of internships and whatnot, totally good for you, go you. But because you only have 1 page, or your resume should only be 1 page, highlight some of your most recent work or your best work, stuff that you're proud of. And that should be the bulk of your resume. That's essentially the main part that you want the recruiter to take away and notice when they're reading through, like, hey, you've worked on all this, you have all these skills, that's really cool, and you have a good amount of experience. Allow for white space. So unlike other industries for design, you can space things out and let elements breathe, which is really nice. You don't have to cram as many words as you can in 1 sheet of paper. So feel free to play around and experiment with spacing, just to make sure that things are readable, and it's easy to read through your resume. The flow is really nice for the recruiter as well. It just really helps, especially within design. Be conscious of your information hierarchy. So for those that don't know, information hierarchy is basically like if you're looking at the poster, the first thing that you see is like at the first level of the hierarchy. Then the next thing that you see might be at the second level, and then the third thing, and so on and so forth. So like the first thing on a, say, a movie poster might be like the title of the movie or the graphics or the photos. The second thing might be like oh no, the dates of the run through at a theater, something like that. And then maybe the third line, or like the small, in really small text, might be like prices or something of the sort. So it's essentially the same idea into your resume. Like, what do you want the recruiter to see first, besides your name, of course? But looking at the format of a resume, like your name might be bolded or whatnot. So that's going to be the first thing that they might notice. Like, oh, okay, this resume belongs to Joe Bruin. Okay, the first thing that they see. The next thing that they see might be like the titles of each section. So like education, work experience, additional information. And so in their head, they're like, okay, that's the next thing I see. If I want, I can make like a layout in my head to indicate like where each section is and what section I want to read. And then the next thing that they see might be the actual like bullet points, just based off like font sizes. So there's a lot of ways to kind of distinguish like what you want others to see in what order. Font size is one example, coloring, like text effects like bolding and italicized words. So we'll go over all that as well in the examples. I'll point some out, but be conscious of your information hierarchy. Like, what do you want the recruiters to see first, then second, then third, etc. And then I did touch on this, 1 column versus 2 columns. This is up to you, and up to like the content that you choose to highlight. And again, we'll go over these examples as well. Color. So especially in the design realm, you are like allowed, or it is acceptable for you to choose an accent color, especially one that matches with your portfolio. So you're more than welcome to choose one. I wouldn't choose more than one, just choose one accent color, it's good enough. And just make sure that it's readable. So please be mindful of things like contrast against the white background, if that's what you're planning to like use. Most likely, right, if you're printing out paper resumes and all that, it's most likely going to be on white paper. So just be mindful of the contrast for whatever color that you choose, especially if you're using light colors like gray. But if you're not sure about colors or whatnot, you're like, oh, I don't know if this is okay, or I don't know if this firm will like it or whatnot. When in doubt, you can just keep it black and white. It's totally fine. Typography. So especially with the content that you put on, you want your content to stick out, not like the decorative elements. So I would not go more than, or I would not select more than 2 types of fonts. If you really want to make like a distinction between, you know, like a header and a body font or whatnot. I think on mine, I might have 2, I don't actually remember, but it's okay if you have everything's just in one font and the only distinguisher is like font sizes. But if you want to be fancy and play around with font pairings, I would not go over 2 font choices. Also, try not to overdo it with text effects as well. So like bolding everything, italicizing every other thing, etc., or underlining or whatnot. Just be selective about your choices, just to make sure that it's readable and the recruiter is not being distracted by all of those things. And also whatever you choose to do in terms of like font choices or text effects, make sure it's consistent throughout your resume. And then on font sizes, again, just choose a few font sizes to show. I'm sure that within your information hierarchy, you want to distinguish different things at different levels, but I wouldn't, you know, select like 10 different font sizes and, you know, create like a huge contrast between like the largest element versus the smallest element. You know, things like, I don't think you should, or you should have that many differentiating elements on your resume anyway. But just to know if you're playing around with different font sizes. But above all, make sure it's readable. Make sure that, you know, the font sizes aren't too small, or they're not, you know, like way too big that they're covering everything else. That the font, the types of font that you choose If you choose to italicize them, it's not going to be hard to read or anything of the sort. Just make sure it's easy to read on the recruiter. Again, 6 seconds on your resume. You want them to take away as much as they can. Okay, last tips. So final notes, make it flow, make it readable for the recruiter. Make sure you highlight important skills that you are able to present. Highlight them either on the skills section or in the bullet points that you're writing. Keep it to 1 page. Please do not go over 1 page. It's very unconventional if you have like a 2 or more page resume. And again, most recruiters are going to look at that and they're like, I have to go through 1,000 of these. I'm not going to spend more than 6 seconds reading through, a 6-page resume. Trust me, I've seen that. So just keep it to 1 page, should be short and sweet. Whenever you send a resume, keep it in PDF format. I can't stress this enough. Sometimes for like different sites, different programs or whatnot, if you submit like using a Word document or whatnot, the formatting might change and it might mess up your resume a bit. So if you do choose to edit or create your resume on Word, save it as a PDF and always submit the PDF just as a precaution. Simplicity is best. If you are unsure about all the decorative elements, just keep it simple. For your links, please remember to hyperlink them. Makes it easy, especially in the digital age when you're applying online through the career sites and whatnot. If the recruiter gets a hold of your resume, they're like, oh, this person has a portfolio. Makes it a lot easier for them to just click on it. So yeah, you could highlight or hyperlink your portfolio, LinkedIn if you choose to put that on, and your email are like the 3 main ones. Keep your tenses the same. So when you're writing the bullet points, you can write them all in like the past tense, but I wouldn't like flip and flop between past tense, present tense, whatnot. Just keep it all to one tense so it's all consistent. And then that leads on to the next point with however you choose to write, however many bullets you choose to write, or decorative elements in your design. Make sure that it's all consistent so that everything flows nicely and recruiters aren't distracted by, varying font sizes or the fact that like one work experience has like 5 bullets, whereas the others have like 2, something like that. Okay, so commonly asked questions. How do I add project experience, or how do I differentiate it between, like, say, work experience? You can have separate sections for both. That's what I have on mine, and that's what you'll see. I have a section for, formal work experience, and I have a section for project experience. But if you're struggling with formatting or like having enough room to add both, you can add just like an indicator of some sort that like lets the recruiter know which is a formal work experience versus a personal project. But you're more than welcome to add it. It's the same process as like any other work experience, but you can just label it differently or put it in a different section. This question is especially for people who are starting out in design or transitioning into design or switching into design. How should I write my resume if I'm switching into design, or like, what if I don't have any formal design experience? If I was like a totally different major and I'm trying to enter the design world, like how do I write this resume and convert my previous work experience into something that's more design related? For this point, I think that this is going to take a lot of thinking on your end, but like, what does a designer do? Or if you're into graphic design or product design or whatever type of design, what does that role entail? And then see if you can pull or make some connections with your previous work or your previous experience. So even if you are like some totally different major or something that's unrelated to what is typical of design, what does design need? Design still needs analytical skills to look at, user research. Design still needs creative skills to create, or to design mockups, prototype mockups. Design still needs to be is an empathetic process. So you still need to understand people to understand what they want and design for that. So a lot of different aspects of design that you can generalize and write your past experience to cater towards like a more design, I think, relevant resume. Should I still include my high school? This is especially for first and second years. So first years, if you're watching this, it's totally fair since you don't have as much work experience as your upperclassmen. But second year is when I would start to remove it as you join more clubs and gain more experience. You can start removing information about your high school and adding in or replacing it with more relevant experience. Bullet points versus paragraphs. This is a good one where, like where you might see in two different resumes for like your work section or your work roles. Some you'll see have bullet points or like they bullet their responsibilities, and some they just might have like a small, maybe like 3 to 4 line paragraph detailing like a summary of what they did. For this one, especially in design, I think it just depends on you. I personally like bullets a lot more, but some of the examples I will show you have paragraphs instead. So I think that's up to you, personal preference. Are icons okay? For example, like for skills or to differentiate different sections of my resume, or for contact information, can I have icons? Again, I've seen resumes that have icons, but I personally would just caution against them, just because, you know, it's like a different element that might be distracting on your resume and might take away from what you really want the recruiter to see. But it's up to you, as long as it's maybe like sized correctly, or it's not like, you know, a circle of like a solid color or whatnot that's gonna distract from like the black and white content of your resume. As long as you use it carefully, it should be okay. Can I add volunteer experience, and how about research? Absolutely, if they are relevant, or if you can word it in a way that's more relevant to design, totally okay as well. Okay, so now that we've gotten through all that content, especially if you're starting out, like how can I make a resume, or what tools can I use? So all of these softwares are fair game. I misspelled Figma. I'll fix that on these slides before we send it out. But feel free to use Figma. That's what a lot of people use, and they can just move their different sections around and play around with spacing a lot more on Figma, or Sketch. If you use Sketch, very similar type of program where you can design your resume that way. And Word, especially, is beginner friendly. I built mine on Word and I didn't have an issue with it. It's still fine. Might be a bit hard if you're working with different columns and whatnot, or if you add more than one column, just as a caution, but it's fair game too. The resumes that I've seen that come out of Word are pretty much the same, so it's up to you. Okay, with that said, that's the end of these slides. So let me stop sharing and share the examples of the resumes that I have. Okay, so just to give some differentiation between resumes. So this is like an old resume that I have that's for, you know, if I'm applying for business or analyst or consulting roles. So you'll see that it's very black and white, very text heavy. So that aspect is quite different from a design resume. But like my content's still the same. It's just formatted. It'll be formatted differently when I show you my design resume. So again, here, like you see, I have my name, my contact information, education, work experience, projects, additional information, leadership experience, all that stuff. And my design resume, it's like you looking at this, you're like, wow, that's kind of overwhelming to read, right? It's a lot of words, very word heavy, but that's what the business realm looks for compared to like the tech realm or the design realm. I did kind of replace a bit of information on my design resume compared to this resume. I don't think I have my languages on here. Maybe I think I added interest instead. So this is just one example of like what like a traditional business resume looks like, and also like what just one column, huge column of text looks like on a resume. So if you have this resume, it's not terrible. Like it still works within the design realm, but this is more traditional for like business roles compared to design roles. And so here's my design resume, which you see is very different. Different formatting, there's a bit more color, there's a bit more thought into like layout. So again, like I mentioned, in terms of how we read, here, top left, I want to start with education, and then you end with interest at the bottom here, since we read right to left, up, down, and you end, so you start at the top left, you end at the bottom right. So bottom right, interest, that's what I want the recruiter to see last. It's just additional fun information, but start with the most important information like education and experience at the top left. So that's how I formatted in terms of readability, or like the directions in which people read. And if you want to go further above that, I have my name first, and then all these links add as like a line or like a separator is what I thought when I was making it. And then you go into education. In terms of information hierarchy, so obviously if you kind of like look or take a step back and look at my resume, maybe blur your eyes a bit, the first thing that will stand out will be my name, and then maybe these two lines, like my headers for each section, as well as like the bolded, roles that I worked in, and then maybe the actual text or like my bullet points. So that's what I mean by information hierarchy. I played with colors, or I used colors and text effects to differentiate like the different elements that I want people to see first. All my links are hyperlinked. I put, like, if you're reading again, left to right, I put my portfolio first, since I think that's the most important that I want people to see in a design resume, and end with my phone number, or my phone number in LinkedIn. People usually use emails a lot more to like send or schedule interviews or whatnot compared to phone numbers. So I'm like, okay, if all goes well, that's the next thing that you'll need. If you want more information, feel free to grab my LinkedIn, or I thought it was just nicer to have 3 links in one, or 3 links next to each other, but just something to note. And I did use gray on my resume, and I'm sure a lot of designers typically use gray too. I'll show a couple other examples as well. But grays, again, I will caution, like mine could be a bit darker, for example, just caution about readability and contrast. Let's see, what are other things to note? Bullet points. I use bullet points, like I mentioned. Another resume that I will show has paragraphs. Again, just depends, but I do want to also say, for consistency's sake, make sure that if you are using bullet points, just keep the number of bullet points about the same. So I have like 2 to 3 for each role, and each are at least on the wider side or the left side or the left column, they're about 2 like lines long, and then on the right hand side they're 3 lines long, just because it's like a smaller column, but I kept them like relatively the same lengths for each side. For technical skills, because I listed them in this way, I decided to use 2 columns just to allow for more room on the left-hand side for my role descriptions. So just something to note. And within my technical skills, again, you just want the information you present to be organized in general. So I just organized my technical skills just for the recruiter to see, like, okay, here's what I can do, and here's where each like software or program falls under. If you have any questions, or rather than having everything jumbled up and they're like, okay, well, for a design role, I don't really need to know how to code. So if it's all kind of like jumbled together, they're like, okay, where's the actual like design software like Adobe or Figma or Balsamic or anything of the sort? So just something to note as you're, writing these out. But again, you see like with each roles, everything's like formatted the same, so it's a bit cleaner. Of course, like for my resume, there's a lot of things that I could improve on, but just this is a template in case you want to use it. So here is Chinmaya's. Chinmaya is a member of ACM Design. He's our workshops director, so he's the one organizing and conducting workshops for this quarter. Very talented designer as well, and he is going into product design. So this is a resume that's geared towards that role. And again, you'll see, like mine, 2 columns, and he decided to flip his. So I had my wider column on the left, he has his on the right. He also decided to use a couple highlight accent colors, but they're relatively in like the same color scheme of like orange or warm colors, so that's totally fine. And added some decorative elements, just or functional decorative elements is what I should say, to help separate his sections. He's linked like his relevant work. And here's like an example of, you know, a very small like overview or like introduction. If you need, I personally don't have room for it, but if you do want to include it, this is an example of like how you can include it, or like a couple lines on like describing yourself. He has both, so if you want to use this template as well, feel free to. And very similar like things, he has his skills listed, his education, projects, so this is passion project, so it's interest and personal, just to give a bit more depth and dimension to like who he is as a person, and listed all of his experience. Interestingly enough, he's kept everything lowercase, but again, like with this decision, he's made sure to keep it consistent throughout his resume. So just another template for you guys to use if you wish. Here's another example. This is Annie, another member of ACM Design. She's one of our PMs, and she has worked as a designer either on campus or professionally or formally in her work experience. But for her resume, she was using it to go into product management. I'm not saying like, oh, if you want to do like whatever roles, you should follow this exact format, but this is just to give you context on like maybe the keywords that they use rather than the actual layout. But any of these layouts will work, just food for thought. So again, with hers, name at the top, education experience, she has lines to kind of section things out. She also used gray as well. A couple accent colors are used, but not that many. Hers is mostly black and white. She also has interests, and like Chinmaya's, her like main bulk is on the right-hand side, which is totally okay. It's not wrong or right to have it on like whatever side. It just depends on you and how you want the recruiter to flow through your resume as they're reading it. Totally up to you. And like the rest of us, she has also sectioned out her hard skills just to make things easier to read and navigate. And her wording's pretty consistent as well. Same number of bullets about and same length for each bullet point in terms of like how many lines, about 1 to 2. So yeah, it's another solid resume that she's been successful with if you want to use this as well. And you'll notice that for the usage of gray, her usage of gray and my usage of gray is a bit different. So hers, she used it on the actual role. And on mine, if we go back to mine, I used it for like the dates. And for me, I just thought like, since gray is like a lighter color, that's the part of the information that I think is the least important in terms of like this whole section of like my role experience. So I wanted to highlight like, okay, in each section, bold like my actual role. And then the next thing would be like the firm and also the actual like roles that I did or my bullet points would be the next thing that they look at. And then third would be like the date. I just didn't think it was as important as the bullets and the actual role. Both hers, she decided to use gray on the roles, the role title itself. And again, this is up to you on how you want to use your colors, but be thoughtful about it. There's no right way. There's just like either a better way or just a way that fits what you want better. So with that said, here is Brian's. Brian, another member of ACM Design, and he's also trying to go into like UX design or product design. Very different layout in terms of compared to the others that we've seen. And again, if you like this layout, feel free to be inspired by it. So he has education here, technical skills, work experience, and extracurriculars, then projects, then awards. Totally fair as well. I'm not sure if it's like my copy that I got where maybe the format is, I'm not sure if the format is like this or if it's actually larger. It just might be the copy that I got, but for me, like reading this, this is quite small, but again, I think it just might be the file that I got. So I'm not sure on that, but just something to note, like make sure everything's readable. Like these are sectioned out like very nicely. And this is an example of where he doesn't really use 2 columns just up here for education and skills. And that's totally fine as well. It's just everything's still sectioned out and easy to read, easy to identify like what's where. And that's what you want in the end as well. And he also used a couple colors, which is still fine. It's still like, it's not distracting from the content really. It's just helping section out everything, which is totally fine. And then here is Stephanie, a former member of ACM Design. She's at Product Space right now, leading the product design track over there. And she, again, also like everyone else, talented designer. And for her, she's specifically going into product design. And this is the resume that she's, or resume format. I'm not sure if this is the current one that she was using to get that role. So again, for hers, again, 2 columns. Hers, though, are a bit more equal in width than like say mine or Annie's. And she's also used a couple accent colors as well. She also used gray. I feel left out. Everyone kind of used like a yellowish orange tone or color, and I should have, maybe I should have as well, just to fit the trend. But here for hers, she uses like, I think something to note here is like for this line where it distinguish or it talks about the firm that she works at, and as well as the actual role, she decided to separate them with like a line, whereas see with Annie's, she also used like a line between the date and the role. But for me, I use like a kind of like a bullet or like a, I don't think this is technically a bullet, just like a point or circle or whatnot, a dot, I guess. So I use that. So again, up to you and how you want to present your like resume and how you want to format things or how you want to separate things. Either works. And here for hers, she did not use bullets. So this is an example of like how you would use maybe like a paragraph, a summary of some sort for each role. And she added 2 columns down here for programs and skills. So for her, she decided to use technical skills, or like separate them into technical skills and more soft skills. And you can do that as well if you have the room or if you want to. For me personally, I just don't have like all these skills listed out, just because I think my project or my work experience can speak for that. But if you want to add it, again, like I'm not saying it's wrong to add it, but if you want to, if you think it's best for you, feel free to. She also has awards, go her. Project experience, her education is here, but in terms of layout, she decided to highlight her experience more, since it's the first thing that you read on the left side, and then end with skills and programs here. So just something to note in the order, like we all had slightly different orders in where we place things, but again, it's pretty much up to you. So with that said, that is the end of our workshop. I hope you guys found inspiration from all these wonderful resumes that I presented. So shout out to everyone who provided the resume. Thank you guys so much. And I hope you guys took, for those listening, took some pointers to take back with you, and you can look at your resume, and hopefully these helped to revamp your resume. And good luck at this recruiting season. So until next time, thank you.